As a financial expert with more than 2 decades of experience of research and writing and teaching this topic, what's the number one thing that keeps people broke?
It's this overwhelming sense of keeping up with other people and this overwhelming sense of other people have more than I do and they're doing better than I am and they're happier than I am. And that treadmill has no end. There's no end to that treadmill where you're going to say, if only I had this much money, then I'd be content. If only I had a bigger house, then I'd be content. Once you're on the treadmill, it goes on forever. And if you're on it, it's almost impossible to feel like you're doing well with money. There's no amount of satiation of if you got a raise, then you'll be okay. If you bought these nicer clothes, then I would be happy. Then I would be content with it. You can be content with a pretty low level of material items. Of course, there's a basic need of food and shelter, whatnot. Above what you need, you move into the realm of what you want.
Well, I think we're all there. Like any one of us, if we're being honest with ourselves, can walk into our closet and say there are roughly 12 pieces of clothing that we wear all the time.
Yes.
And the rest of it were all things that I wanted in the moment, or I thought I needed, or I thought would impress somebody if I were going to a wedding, but you didn't actually need it.
And that is what keeps people broke. That's it. It's the simplest thing. And I think people know it. They may not want to hear it, but they know it, that it's your desire to keep up with other people.
Your mega bestseller, The Psychology of Money, changed my life, changed the way I think about money, changed my mindset about money. And I want to read to you on page 41. This is the chapter, Never Enough.
Yep.
And you write, the hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. If expectations rise with results, there is no logic in striving for more because you'll feel the same after putting in extra effort. It gets dangerous when the taste of having more money, more power, more prestige, increases ambition faster than satisfaction. In that case, one step forward pushes the goalpost 2 steps ahead. You feel as if you're falling behind, and the only way to catch up is to take greater and greater amounts of risk. Can you unpack that for us?
It's funny when you read that. I remember writing those sentences. I remember where I was when I wrote those specific
Where were you?
sentences. I was in my basement at a house in Virginia where I wrote this book. And I remember writing that and thinking, I mentioned this earlier, but so much of what I write about is self-reflection. And it's not that I've mastered these things and I'm just trying to show you how smart I am. It's like I wrote that because I've fallen for that trap all the time. It's true that the expectations game has no ending. There's always somebody who is getting richer faster than you. And if you're always just seeking validation, if your key to happiness is always, if only I had what that person has, you're never going to be satisfied with what you have. And the more dangerous thing, I think, is once you have that mindset that if only I had more, I would be happier, then it kind of grows exponentially. Because if you tell yourself, I'll be happy once I have $10,000, and then you get 10,000 and you're like, oh, maybe it's 100,000. Maybe if I had $100,000, then I'd be happy. And then maybe you're fortunate enough to get that money. And then it's, oh, maybe it's 1 million. It grows exponentially.
And so I also think that there is this thing that happens, at least it happened for me, that as I started to feel like I wasn't under such crushing debt, or I got some reward at work, a small bonus, whatever, I immediately upticked the amount of money or the expense of the thing that I was already buying.
Right. And part of that, I think, is fine. I think people can spend money in a way that's going to make them happier. There are some people who would give you the advice of like, it's never going to make you happier. Just save everything that you can, live like a monk. And that's not my message. I think you can spend money as in way. I found ways of spending money in my own household that I'm like, oh, that was well worth it. But I also, back to the expectations thing, I grew up around Lake Tahoe, California.
Okay.
And this was before tech money, where Tahoe and Truckee, the town that I lived in, was not very wealthy. It is now because tech money came in. But back then it was very much a middle-class town. And then I went to college in Los Angeles. And I couldn't believe making that shift from middle-class mountain town to Beverly Hills kind of area, what it did to my definition of rich. As I said earlier, it used to be that my definition of rich was a new pickup truck, a new F-150 that's a rich person. And I moved to LA and it just exploded. No matter how successful you are, you pull up to a stoplight and even if you're driving a Lamborghini, there's 17 others right there. And you never feel like you're getting enough. And the conditions for happiness, I think, were much greater in that middle class town. Now, I did a pretty good job in LA in my own mind of still keeping my expectations in check. I think a lot of that was fear. I always had a fear that I was never going to make it, and so I was saving as much as I could just out of a sense of fear. But if I look at everybody else, like who was happier? It was the people who were living a modest life, enjoyed their family, had good time with their friends, focused on their health, and lived what was by comparison to others a very modest life. And so I think about that now of like, what should your aspiration be? It's interesting with parents. If you ask parents, what do you want for your kids, particularly if their kids are young, most parents will say, I just want them to be happy when they're older. And then if you say, well, do you want them to be rich and successful? The parents will probably say, well, yeah, that would probably be great, but I just want them to be happy. And I think parents say that because you know there's a difference between the two. You know there's a difference between being rich and being happy. You've
Mm.
experienced it as an adult.
Hmm.
And so even if your kids are middle class, doing modest by expectations, you know that they can be happy if they're keeping their expectations in check and they're focusing on the things that matter.
Well, what I love that you keep coming back to is that your definition truly for the word happiness and the way we casually use it is contentment, which means you are in the present moment of your life
Yes.
and you are not seeking something more.
I
You
had
are
this
able to be okay with where things are and where things aren't. How can somebody figure out why they're buying something? Because I think most of us mindlessly spend money because in the moment we want that thing or we're bored or stressed or whatever. Like most people don't actually know why they're spending money. So, how can you, Morgan, start to become conscious of exactly why you're spending your money on things?
I think with every dollar that you spend, it's always one of two buckets. And you
Okay.
should ask yourself which bucket this falls into. Is buying this thing going to make me and my family happier? Or am I buying it to impress other people, most of whom are strangers? It's always one of those two things. If I'm buying food, that's for me and my family, clear as day. If I'm buying new clothes, a lot of that might be, or a new car, a lot of that might be my attempt to impress strangers, most of whom are not paying any attention to you whatsoever. It's always one of those two things. Do you want to use money as a tool to live a better life? Or do you want to use money as a yardstick of status to measure yourself against others by? It's completely normal and natural to have that. But when you realize that that's the game that you're playing, that a lot of these aspirations that I have are to impress people who are not even paying attention to me. And they're not paying attention to me because they're busy worrying about themselves. They're busy in their own heads saying, are people impressed with me? Are people looking at me? And that's a huge part of what's going on inside these people's heads is that their biggest aspiration in life is trying to impress strangers who are not even looking to begin with.
Well, that was one of the big lessons from your work for me, which is every dollar you spend falls in two
One
buckets.
of those two
You're
things.
either spending money to make other people think something about you, or you're spending money in a way that makes you feel good about you. How do you know the difference between the pair of jeans that you're about to buy that you don't need, but they look really cool and you think you're going to look good in them and you're also feeling bad about your body so you hit spend? How do you dissect that? Because I think a lot of us don't understand exactly why we're buying things.
I had this experience in college. I wrote about it in my first book, The Psychology of Money. I was a valet at a five-star hotel in Los Angeles.
I love this story.
It was so much fun. It was such a cool job. There's never been a better job. I would go back and do that job again. It was
Why
so
did
much
you
fun.
love that job so much?
It was two things. I got to drive very fancy cars, and in the mind of a 19-year-old boy parking a Ferrari, there's nothing better in the world. And two, I didn't really realize this explicitly at the time, but it was my first window into the psychology of very wealthy people. And that to me was absolutely, I learned so much during those years, age, 18 to 22. And one of the things I realized, and I remember when this hit me during a shift, that if somebody came into the hotel driving a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, I would stop and look at the car and be impressed. But I would never look at the driver and say, that guy's so cool. What I would do is I would imagine myself as the driver. And I imagined that if I was driving, people would look at me and say, look at Morgan, he's so cool. And one day I was like, do you see the irony? I don't care about the driver, but I want to be the driver because I think people will care about me. And it was this stark realization of like, nobody is thinking about you as much as you are. They're busy thinking about themselves. And even when people are impressed with your house or your car, what they're actually doing is saying, if I had Mel's house, if I had Morgan's car, then I would be happy. Then people would look at me. And so the idea that everyone is pretty selfish and self-centered in that sense, where they're not impressed with you. They might be impressed with your stuff because they're imagining having your stuff. Once I came to terms with that, my desire for impressing other people plunged. Didn't plunge to zero. I don't want to walk around in a burlap sack. I want to impress my coworkers and I want to look professional. I want to, back then when I was trying to find a girlfriend who became my wife, then it was very important. But the idea that no one's thinking about you as much as you are will collapse your aspirations in a wonderful way. And it will get you towards contentment much quicker than anything else.
That is such a mind-blowing realization, because if we're all chasing all this stuff on the outside so that people look at the stuff that we have and then think we're amazing,
Yeah.
you're proving in that simple example, that's not how the human brain works at all. They think the stuff is cool. They don't think you are.
Everything being a competition for resources. It's rarely saying being impressed with other people. Not never. And I think it's the same with your spouse, your partner. My wife does not care at all what kind of car I drive. She doesn't care about what new jeans I bought. She couldn't care. What she cares about is, am I a good dad? Am I a good spouse? Am I a good friend? Am I patient and understanding and helpful? That's it. And I think you can extend that analogy to anything else in your life. Your friends, your coworkers, your relationship with your children. We spend so much time saying, if only I had nicer things, bigger things, better things, then that would be better. What matters, and people know intuitively that this matters, is that you are a good spouse, a good friend, a good parent. If you do want strangers to be impressed with you, they're not going to be impressed with your car. They will be impressed with how kind and caring and helpful you are to them. Now, that's easier said than done too, because I think the overwhelming urge is, yeah, Morgan, like I might believe what you're saying, but I still think this car would make me happy. Like, it's such a powerful thing that we have that it's not something that you can just get over immediately. And even after doing this for 20 years and writing these books, it's not something that I've been able to fully overcome.
And another way to prove this point is that I guarantee you in your social circle, there is somebody that you know that has a huge house or an amazing car, and you would not want to
And
be near
miserable.
them, and they're miserable.
Right.
And so just having all that stuff that you want doesn't make you like them. And so I think intellectually we know this, but if you have bad spending habits, how do you change them, Morgan?
I think you first have to ask the question, why do you have bad spending habits? What hole are you trying to fill? What has buying these things done to your happiness in the past? And if the answer is nothing, which is probably the answer, trying to fill that hole first, trying to answer that question first. So I think you have to kind of start on the therapist's couch, literally or figuratively, and take a look in the mirror and being like, what am I trying to achieve? Who do I want to become? Why do I want to be that? And why am I striving for these things? And for a lot of people, it's kind of like a binge spending that has got them into trouble, where it's a stress relief. It's a relief valve. And I think I think in your head, what you probably think it is if I bought these things, then my problems would go away. And the truth is that might be true in the moment. For spending, it's almost never true. It's very rarely true that your binge spending is going to fill any kind of emotional hole that you have. And the other thing is that if you're buying these things, particularly on credit, you have bad habits, you're getting yourself into debt. The new sweater that you bought might give you a day or two of happiness before it's either worn out or you don't care about it much anymore. But the paying it off is going to stick with you for years or months or even decades. And so that kind of thing of controlling your future and independence. Every dollar of debt that you have from these poor spending habits is a piece of your future that somebody else owns. It's a piece of your time that you owe to the bank, you owe to the lender. And the opposite of that is every dollar of savings that you have, the reverse of bad spending habits, is a piece of your future that you own, that you have control over. Every single dollar. I viewed this since I was 17, that every dollar that I save, even if it was literally $1, was $1 of my future that I gained back. That's always how it felt to me. And that's always been my goal for saving, and my motivation for saving was, I just want to be independent. I just want to wake up and do whatever I want. And I feel like my savings has bought that. It's not, when I save money, it's not because I say, oh, I'm saving up to buy a new car, even though there can be that and that can be great. If I save $100, I view that as purchasing $100 of independence. I'm
Hmm.
spending that money. It's giving me independence today. And I think that can be an antidote to bad spending habits. A lot of people will say, why save money? Like they don't really understand the purpose of saving money.
Right. Because if you don't have a lot of money,
It
it
feels
seems weird.
useless.
Why would I put $20 away from my paycheck because that's all I can afford to do right
It's
now?
all that you can do. And so it
Yes.
feels like, why even bother? I might as well
Yes.
just YOLO to spend all of it. I
Yes.
think once you shift the mentality from why save $100 to spend in the future if I could just spend $100 right now? Why am I delaying this gratification if I could have it immediately? If you view it like that, then I understand the mentality of YOLO, spend everything. Why even save? Doesn't matter. Let's just go into debt. Who cares? Once you view it as that $100, you are purchasing today $100 of independence, $100 of peace, $100 of sleeping better at night.
Hmm.
Then it completely shifts the game. And so if I save $100, that's not delayed gratification. That today, in this moment, today and tonight, gives me $100 of happiness and more contentment today because I feel like I'm more independent than I was before I saved
Hmm.
that money. And when you get back to, I think, what most people want out of money,
Oh my God. Most people think that buying the nice car is the flex. You're saying,
independence is the flex. There's a great quote from Nassim Taleb where he says, "My only metric of success is how much time you have to kill." And now, there's obviously a spectrum of that, but that's always been, I just want independence. And you can have independence at a pretty low level of financial income and assets. That was my grandmother-in-law. She had nothing and she had pure independence. You can be one of the richest men in the world and have no independence, completely beholden to the opinions and the desires of somebody else. And there are multi-billionaires who are way less independent than my grandmother-in-law. And that, I think, is an empowering message of, like, your feeling of being independent is a feeling. It's a story that you've told yourself.
hmm.
It's not there's no financial level at which, like, okay, once you have this much money, then you're set free. You can be a multi-billionaire and completely beholden to other people. You can have very little money and have pure financial independence in your head.